In this week's video, we go looking for all sorts of different birds, including one that evaded us last year, one that's particularly controversial. We race to the other side of the country to try and see an unusual owl. There's dips, there's successes, and there's surprises. This week's adventure starts a little closer to home than we were expecting, giving me a little deja vu.
Morning!
Morning. We're at Burton Marsh on the Wirral. Last night when we were deciding which far-flung part of the country we were going to visit for which bird, there was reports here on the Wirral yesterday of a pretty exciting species, a white stork. It was seen flying around. It landed at Burton Mere Wetlands, which is not far away from here. We're going to wait for that to open and go and have a look there. But
there's also green woodpecker nearby.
Yes, there's been reports of green woodpecker which eluded us last year a few times.
So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed we find that as well, and then we'll move on. But stick with us, let's see if we find this stork.
Whilst we were waiting for Burton Mere to open, we had half an hour to kill. So we headed down to Burton Point as Kaylee wanted to see the little owl I saw in the last video, and there was the possibility of hopefully a green woodpecker. And when we arrived at the sandstone cliff face at Burton Point, the little owl wasn't difficult to find. Initially sat on a fence post, then flew to some trees. As the owl was distant, I tried to do the same trick I did in the previous video, by putting my camera on a fence post and jimmying it into the right angle with any debris I could find on the floor, which I managed to do quite quickly, not realising that the camera had focused behind the owl as opposed to on the owl. Never mind, it's not completely blurred, and if you want to see an unblurred version, go to the previous video. Kaylee was happy to see the owl though.
We've just had a little owl.
Yeah.
That was nice.
Nearly had all the owls, though.
You just need Shorty. We haven't had that yet. They do get those here, but usually at dusk.
Without seeing or hearing any sign of the green woodpecker, we headed back in the direction of the car, as Burton Mere was going to be open soon. As we walked back down the path, there was plenty of birds singing. Dunnocks in the trees, robins too. And again though, deja vu set in. Burton Marsh's unusually showy Chetty's warbler made another appearance. As we got back to the car, I noticed in the field next to it a buzzard on one of the fence posts. I walked over to try and get a better view, and it flew a little further away to a further fence post and sat there for a while. We now jumped in the car and headed 10 minutes down the road to Burton Mere Wetlands, where upon arrival in the car park I quickly made a friend. This very tame robin came right up to us, probably after mealworms or seeds, but unfortunately I didn't have any. Instead I took a little video of it and then we headed out into the reserve. Noticing from the visitors centre a good number of avocets back. This species has been very successful at this reserve, but we had other birds to find.
Hey folks.
Hey.
We're at Burton Mere Wetlands, hoping for some more species. Green woodpecker would be nice. Let's hope that white stork shows again.
Our first port of call was towards the far side of the reserve, so we hot-footed it in that direction, stopping a few times to see birds en route, including a very showy grey heron. Our plan was to head to a grassy field, which is on top of the sandstone cliffs that we saw the little owl earlier. This is another spot where in previous days people had spotted a green woodpecker, a bird that eluded us last year. And when we arrived, we were somewhat encouraged.
Hey folks, we've come to the spot where the green woodpecker has been seen in previous days, and we've just heard it. I know that's one small step, but that would be
better than last year, though.
It's better than last year.
We walked up the field looking for any movement either in the grass or in the trees and bushes at the back of the field. There was plenty of wildlife to scan through. Whilst we were standing there, we were joined by an extremely tame pheasant that was feeding. By now we'd been here for about half an hour and not heard the green woodpecker again. We'd even split up. Kaylee was scanning a different part of the field than me. I was even losing a bit of confidence until I heard Kaylee shouting "Nigel, Nigel" and flailing her arms about. And she'd only gone and found it, the bird that gave us so much trouble last year, the amazing green woodpecker. This individual here is a male bird. Kaylee said it had showed up almost from out of nowhere and started to peck around, feeding in the grass. This species, although it did elude us last year, and we've only ever seen it a couple of times, isn't really rare at all, with over 50,000 breeding pairs. The highest concentrations of this species are in the south and east of the country. Regardless, we were over the moon to see this one today.
Guess what?
Guess who found him?
Guess who found it? Kaylee found the green woodpecker. That was amazing. I think it's still down there feeding.
Yes, yeah.
This one hasn't jinxed us this year. This is a shout out for you, Tony Critcher. You've been mentioning it all year so far.
We've got it for you.
We've got it for you.
Pleased with our finding, we walked down the hill and looked back on ourselves, and the green woodpecker was still there, feeding amongst the grass. As much as we didn't want to leave, we did have to, as there was more birds to find.
I can't. That was amazing. That was amazing. Kaylee was there. I was further up the field, and Kaylee was like, Nigel, come over here, waving her hands, animated at me. Oh, that was stunning. That was such a cool bird. I know these aren't super rarities or anything, but it's just quite a special bird for us because
especially when you missed it last year.
Yeah,
It makes it more exciting.
we're super happy with that.
Yeah.
Right, on to the hide. See what's there.
We proceeded now to Border Hide, which is the furthest most hide from the visitors centre, and where recently there'd been spotted redshank reported, a bird we have seen once this year, but reasonably distant. And when we arrived, there were a large group of wading birds in the middle of the shallow pool in front of us. Most of them were black-tailed godwits, some of them heading towards their russet summer plumage. Amongst these godwits there were groups of the smaller knot, and also a few common redshank too. Our task was to scan through these waders to find the spotted redshank. And conveniently for us, as we were scanning the right hand side of the group, one wandered out from the middle of the group and out into the open to preen. This species is not a UK breeder, although a small number, around 100 birds, do winter in the UK, and a few hundred more join them on migration in spring and autumn. And although this time of year the spotted redshank's plumage is kind of a mottled grey, when in breeding plumage they're jet black with white dots on the wings. This individual wasn't the only spotted redshank here. We picked out 3 of them in the mixed waders. There were plenty of other birds here too, including large groups of black-headed gulls already in their breeding plumage. Regardless, it was now time to head back towards the car and decide on our next move. This meant a drive to the outskirts of Bolton to look for a pretty special duck.
We have now come a little bit further out of the way to Bolton, well, near Bolton, to Cutacre Country Park, hoping for another duck for our year list, the garganny.
Which is the one we're missing.
Which is one we're missing, yeah. Hopefully we'll find it. There were 3, I think, reported here this morning, so it's now into the afternoon, but we're going to go and have a look, so stick with us.
We headed down the path about 20 minutes towards a small pool that was named Swan Lake, although we weren't entirely clear about where on the reserve this was.
Hey folks, so we just got a bit lost. We're still not quite sure where we are, but we've bumped into another birder who said that the gargannies have flown, but not far, maybe onto another pool or behind some vegetation.
But before finding the garganny, we had to first find the pool, which, after following a dog walker we were hoping was going in the right direction, we found it, and immediately realised why it was called Swan Lake. Joining this lone swan was plenty of Canada geese, and plenty of ducks, including gadwall and tufted duck, but there was no initial sign of the garganny, so we walked around the sides of the pool as much as we can to try and get different views, en route spotting this small domesticated duck. And whilst I was getting footage of a group of mixed gulls, I noticed something in the top of the camera view. Out of nowhere, our pair of garganny had showed up under the radar, swimming along the bank on the opposite side of the pool. I walked along the bank to try and get a better view, but very soon a train went past on the nearby tracks, and all of the gulls and ducks lifted. After a few moments, when everything settled back down again, we couldn't find the gargannies. That was until eagle-eyed Kaylee picked them out on the near side bank, not too far away from us. This species, although a UK breeder, is very scarce, with only about 100 breeding pairs. During breeding season, these ducks are reasonably secretive, so generally not easy birds to track down. And although by now it was raining and we were getting wet, it was lovely to spend some time with this wonderful pair of gargani.
Hey folks, so when we arrived it wasn't here,
No, look at it.
and now we found it, although it was nice and sunny, and now it's raining, so we're heading back towards the car. But gargani, great, what
Male and a female.
a male and a female, yeah.
She's good.
Another one for the year list. Don't know where next. Keep with us.
We took a very rainy walk back to the car and then headed about 20 minutes down the road to Pennington Flash Nature Reserve. We were delayed by a bit of traffic, but we did finally get there, so we parked up and headed towards one of the hides. En route, seeing this lovely pair of magpie that were sheltering in a tree, and on the flash itself there was a number of birds, including this common gull, and further down the usual geese and swans. But now it was time for us to sit in the dry for a few minutes.
Hey folks, we are at Pennington Flash in the rain. We've come here we've come here for a reason. In the next hide along from where we are now, usually, or on previous occasions, I've seen a bird that we need for our year list, the stock dove, and I'm hoping we find that today. We might sit in the hide for a little bit though, because it's very wet.
From this hide we did spot a swan on a nest and the usual spattering of ducks, mainly tufted ducks. Now though, we braved the rain and walked round the corner to the hide. This hide looks onto an area next to the lake with many bird feeders. These feeders are well maintained and filled, and are visited by a good range of birds, with many of the local mallards under the bird feeders hoovering up the leftovers. Amongst the more common species like chaffinches and robins that were present, we did notice some other birds too, including groups of reed buntings. One colourful finch species that was present in good numbers here was the bullfinch, with the male with his striking pink tummy and black mask, and the female slightly more subdued. Regardless, these were amazing to see and would come quite close on some nearby bird feeders. Occasionally, joining these amazingly colourful bullfinches was a nuthatch. We were enjoying watching these small birds that we almost forgot about our target species here, the stock dove. And almost like magic, like the birding gods were listening, a couple of them flew in. This species, which is reasonably close in appearance to our town feral pigeons, is reasonably often overlooked or mistaken, and differs from the feral pigeon in choice of habitat, preferring woodland and farmland as opposed to towns and cities. Stock doves are pretty widespread in the UK and have a bit of a success story. Since the ban of pesticides in the 1970s, over the last 30 years their population has doubled, which is good news indeed, and a great species today to tick off our year list. Unfortunately though, they didn't stay with us for long, as the bird tables were taken over by another species, the mallard. Obviously, the scraps under the bird feeders weren't quite enough.
Well, success with the stock doves. We got those, and the hide was amazing. Yeah, loads of bullfinch. What else? Reed buntings. Yeah, all sorts. The mallards were trying to take over the bird feeders a little bit, which is a bit crazy, but still. We're going to have a quick walk around the reserve before we move on, so stick with us. Let's see what else we find.
The next hide looked over a large pool and produced a few species, including a sleeping female goosander, a young heron trying to fish, a number of ducks including multiple male shovelers, and a cormorant that was roosting on the opposite side of the pool. By now though, it was getting reasonably late in the afternoon, and there was one more place I wanted to visit before the end of the day. This meant driving to South Manchester and Chorlton Water Park, for a species that's definitely divided opinions.
Hey folks, we have stopped on our way back at Chorlton Water Park to look for a bit of a controversial species, the ring-necked parakeet. I can hear them already.
Cute little sausage over there now.
Oh, is he over there?
Yeah.
Oh, let's go and have a look. These are ace, I love them.
The ring-necked parakeet is a native of Asia and Africa, with our UK population being of Indian descent. This species is Britain's only naturalised parrot, and our present naturalised population originates from about 1969. The origin of these birds is from escapees or birds released deliberately. And as this species is pretty hardy and can survive most climates, they have done very well in the UK, spreading from the London area, now being present in Kent, Birmingham, Manchester and South Yorkshire, constantly spreading further afield. Now, why did I say they're controversial? Firstly, they're very noisy and have large communal roosts. Also, being quite large, they can dominate bird feeders, leaving our smaller native birds to wait. One main opposition to this species is their impact on the ecosystem, with people claiming that they steal nest holes from other birds. Although, after research, the recent evidence shows any impact is minimal, with the parakeets breeding much earlier in the year than most of our native species. Regardless of if you love them or you hate them, this exotic green parakeet is here to stay.
Hey folks, well, we certainly got the parrots. There was plenty of them about. Yeah, excellent. What a day. We've pretty much hit everything we've gone for.
Yep.
Except for the white stork, which didn't show up. Apparently it was seen kind of
Circling in the air, wasn't it?
circling in the air around Saltney today, which is not too far from where it was yesterday, but not good enough for us, unfortunately. Never mind. We're going to head back now and grab the van.
Yeah. We're
And
going home to get the van.
We're going home. Yeah. That's exactly what we're doing, and we're going to have an overnight somewhere and resume in the morning, so keep with us for that. That could be pretty good. Let's get some more birds for the year list. See you tomorrow.
After a long and successful day's birding, we went and got the van and drove 3.5 hours into Lincolnshire. The following morning we woke up very early after only a couple of hours sleep and headed about 15 minutes down the road to a Christmas tree farm near the village of Bourne. This is where, over the last couple of weeks, a very interesting bird had been spotted. The only problem is, after 2 hours or so of waiting, this bird hadn't showed.
Hey folks, see Kaylee there. So, we got up really early, like really early.
And it's Mother's Day.
And it's
Stay, everybody.
Yeah, it's Mother's Day, and we had this bright idea. Well, sorry, I had this bright idea last night to drive all the way to Lincolnshire with the sole purpose of seeing, well, potentially an amazing bird, a dark-breasted subspecies of barn owl, which has been here for a couple of weeks. Although it's not here today.
No, so we're running off for like 3 hours.
Yeah, we're exhausted. We've been here for a couple of hours waiting for this barn owl to show. Most people have left. I don't know what we're going to do next. I don't know if we've really got much time, but stick with us whatever we do.
We stuck around for another half an hour or so, watching the local red kites circling and watching some of the smaller birds coming into the hedgerows, like this lovely yellowhammer that was singing. At this point though, our patience was wearing thin, so we thought we'd have a break and drive down the road 10 minutes to Willow Tree Fen. This is a car park that looks over a large area of wetland and fields, but is a great place to see common cranes. When we arrived, we were welcomed by some other birders and a very friendly hare that was running up and down in the grass just in front of us. On the nearby flooded area there was a few ducks and geese. Most of the geese were greylag. At this point, one of the other birders came up to me and pointed out a crane that was walking in the distance behind a reed bed. Although currently this was the only crane we could see, there was plenty of others calling, some of them reasonably close. So we stuck around for a bit, hoping to get some better views. In the distance at the back of the marsh there was a couple of marsh harriers hunting. And whilst we were watching these, a couple of cranes flew in, but again landed out of sight in the tall reeds. At this point, Kaylee spotted on her phone a report of a Russian white-fronted goose that apparently was present in front of us, so we set about scanning through the greylag geese and soon found it. This is a species that only winters in the UK and breeds, guess where? Yes, in Russia. And a bird we've only ever seen a couple of times. We have got this goose on our year list after seeing a flock of them in sea houses in Northumberland on a previous video. Regardless, a great bird to see though. Now, back to the stars of the show, the cranes. And these were beginning to get more active, flying about a little more and some of them landing where we could see them. And not just one, there was a good few of them. I think Kaylee counted about a dozen in this group. For a couple of minutes they walked around the field battling the wind, This species, the tallest bird in Britain, has a small UK breeding population of about 80 pairs, with a few more continental birds showing up on migration or in winter. Thankfully, the crane population in the UK is growing, albeit quite slowly, with about half of the birds here being naturally arriving migrants and the other half being birds that have been reintroduced. By now, most of the cranes had returned behind the reed bed, but a small number of them had flown a bit closer, giving us great views, with 2 of them even displaying to each other. What a privilege it is to see these unbelievable birds so close. Now though, it was time to say goodbye to the cranes and the marsh harriers, as the dark-breasted barn owl had been reported again. When we arrived back, there were no other birders, and we discovered the report was from a few minutes after we left. Kicking ourselves for our impatience, we did stick around for a short while, but the only birds we were left with were the local red kites coming down to feed on a carcass on the road. The road isn't that slopey, I didn't hold the camera straight.
Hey folks, so we got great views of those cranes at Willow Tree Fen. Whilst we were there, the barn owl that we missed was reported again. When we got back, nobody was here, and the barn owl also wasn't here. But
We did see 2 barn owls on the way here, just not the right one.
yeah, we saw 2 regular ones, but not the one we're looking for. But never mind, we've hit everything else we've gone for this weekend, so that's excellent. So, before we go, I've just got to say a thank you. They probably won't be watching, but a thank you to Viking Optical for
The fast turnaround on my binoculars, it was absolutely incredible.
They did really well.
Yeah.
Kelly had a bit of a fault with the binoculars, and we sent it back, and they were absolutely amazing. Communicated really well, turned it around really fast. Amazing.
No, it was really good. I also need to say a massive thank you to the subscribers who sponsored me with Water for Autism. It's going really, 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 really well, and we're up to £132 so far.
Excellent. Thank you all for that. That's a worthy cause.
Yep.
Well then, we'll see you next time. Thanks very much for watching. Please like.
Please subscribe.
And please press the notification bell.
Bye.
Bye bye.